In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use loop in Java. So let's get started. Okay, so basically what we are going to do is we are going to talk about the while loop. We'll also talk about using the while loop for input validation, and then we are going to talk about for loop. Now before we start, the question is why do we use loop? So answer is very simple. Sometimes we want to repeat the same task multiple times, right? We want to do the same thing over and over and over again. So instead of writing the same code multiple times, basically what we do is we put that code in the loop. So like for example, if I want to ask user for 10 numbers and add them, right? So in this case what I will do is the simplest way to do this will be just to use a loop. Okay, so now what are the different kinds of loop that we have in Java? So in Java we have two types of loop. We have the for loop, the while loop and the for loop. Okay, and as we'll look at the structure of the loops, you'll see that they are a little bit different, but the functionality is exactly the same. So you can always kind of replace a while loop with a for loop, and a for loop can always be replaced with a while loop. So now let's see what does a while loop look like, and then we'll also look at some examples later on. So here's the general form. So it starts with the while condition or while keyword, and then there's a condition which is enclosed in the parentheses. Now this condition is going to be just a Boolean expression, or an expression using relational operators. So when you evaluate this condition, it's always going to come out either true or false. Okay, and then just kind of keep in mind that there's no semicolon after this. Then you have your opening and closing curly braces, and then of course the body will contain all the statements that are going to be executed. So the way it is going to work is, when we start the loop, you are going to look at this condition. If this condition is true, then I'm going to execute the statements which are part of the body, and then I will go back up to the top and I'm going to look at the condition again. If the condition is true, again I'm going to execute all the statements that are part of the body, and then I'm going to go back again. Okay, and I'll keep on doing this as long as this condition is true. So once that condition becomes false, then I'm going to skip the body and I'm going to exit the loop. Okay, so let's look at one simple example. So what am I doing over here? So I'm initializing a variable called index. I'm initializing it to 0, and my condition says index is less than equal to 30. So when my index is 0, of course my index is less than equal to 30. So this is true. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print the value of index, and then I'm going to increment my index. So now my index is 1. Okay, and then I'm going to say compare it with 30. Now of course 1 is still less than equal to 30. I'm going to print that index, and then I'm going to increment it, and I'm going to keep on doing as long as my index is less than equal to 30. So once it becomes 31 excuse me, once my index become 31, then my 31 is not less than equal to 30. So that means this one will become false, and I'm going to exit the loop. So let's actually go and write this code in Java and see how it looks like. Okay, so let's go to our graph, and I've already created like the structure of the class, so that we don't have to kind of waste our time kind of writing all the stuff that you guys already know about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my loop in there. So I'm going to initialize my index, and then I will have my loop. Okay, so this index plus plus is just going to increment my index by 1. So it is same thing as doing index equal to index plus 1. Okay, now let's actually go and run this. So let's save it. Okay, let's see what's going to happen. String. Okay, I know I left on my class declaration. So I'm going to indent all this stuff to kind of make sure that it looks nice and make sure that we can, it's easy for us to read and see what's going on. Okay, so let's try to compile it again, and hopefully this time it will work. Okay, one error. So let's see. Okay, I got an extra braces over there, closing one. Okay, so now it's done. Okay, so let's actually go and run this. Clear, and so it goes from index equal to 0 to index equal to 30. Now let's actually try a couple of other things that I want you to kind of remember. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add index is, so that we know what's really, what we are really displaying. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, outside my loop, I'm going to say system.out.println. So it will kind of show you the message that what you will do. So basically once you exit the loop, you are going to actually execute this statement. Okay, so let's compile this. And so we started from 0 and then up to 30, and then we exit the loop. Okay, now a couple of things. Let's say what happened if I put a semicolon in here. Okay, I mean, it's not going to be better, it's still going to work, but it's not going to do what we really want it to do. Okay, so let's go and run it. Okay, so now what's going on? Basically what happened is now we are kind of stuck in this loop, because what is happening is like it's executing this loop, and this two statements are not part of this loop. So it's, my index is never incremented, so that means it will keep on going, it will kind of keep on executing this loop forever, because my index is never going to be changed, and this becomes what we call an infinite loop. So let's go and actually end this. So that was one thing that I wanted to show you, and then there is another thing. I can actually change the number of loops, the number of time my loop iterate. So let's say for example if I make it less than, okay, and then see what happened. So in this case it goes from 0 to 29, and when it was less than equal to 30, it was actually going from 0 to 30. So now it's going up to 0 to 29. So it's kind of really important that we know exactly how many times you want to run this loop and make sure that we have the right condition in there. Okay, another thing that I can show you is, let's say for example if I start from 1, okay, and make it equal to 30. So let's go and run this, clear this out. Okay, so now it starts at 1 and it ends at 30. So we need to make sure that we start at the right place and then we end at the right place. Okay, so let's go and see what else can we do with the loop. Let's look at a couple of other examples. So here's another example. So what I would really want to do is ask the user for 10 numbers and then add them up. Okay, so let's try that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually comment this out, so that I'm going to actually post this so that you can actually kind of look at that example, but I don't want to keep on running it. So in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a variable in account, and then I'm going to ask the user, actually let's call it a number, okay, and then I'm going to have a sum which is going to be initialized to 0, because that's what I'm going to use to kind of sum my number. So I'm going to say, okay, actually I need one more thing, so I need int count equal to 0, okay, and then what I'm going to do is count equal to 0, and then I'm going to actually run my loop. Okay, see, I started my count to be 0, so that means it's going to go from 0 till 9, so that will be 10 iteration, or my loop will actually execute 10 times. Okay, so let's put our braces there, and then I'm going to do is make sure that I increment my count. Okay, and then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the user for the input. And then I'm going to go and read it. So my number is equal to keyboard dot next int, and then I'm going to add it to my sum. So I will say sum equal to sum plus number. Okay, and then once my loop ends, then I'm going to actually display the result. Okay, so let's compile this and let's try to run this. Okay, no error, that's good. So let's go to a run window and then clear this, and then you are going to run it. Okay, so it will ask for the number. So now remember, it's going to ask for 10 numbers. Okay, and I can put any numbers in there. So let's say 12, 14, 10, 9, 6, 5, 78, 13, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, and then 13, and then we got the result, which is 172. Okay, so basically this loop iterates 10 times. It asks for the user to enter 10 numbers, and then it's going to add it to the sum, and then of course the count is going to be used to kind of keep track of how many times you have gone, or how many times my loop was executed. So now remember, when we start, my count is equal to 0, so 0 is less than 10, which is true, so that means I'm going to go through this, and then I'm going to increment my count. So now my count becomes 1, and it keeps on going till count becomes 10, and once it becomes 10, then 10 is of course not less than equal to 10, so we are going to stop and we are going to exit this loop, and then we are going to display the result. Okay, so let's see what else do we have. Couple of things that I would really want you to kind of be careful about. Number one, make sure that set the conditions false in the loop, so that loop will end. Okay, so loop that do not end are called infinite loop. Okay, now the other thing is, like, the loop can execute 0 or more time if the condition is false. Okay, so let me actually show you what does this really mean. So let's say what happens if I kind of leave this out. Okay, that's the first thing. So that means I'm not incrementing my count, so that means it keeps on running. So instead of asking for 10 numbers, it will keep on going. Okay, so let's actually give this a try. So this is my first number, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I already entered 10 number, but it didn't stop, right? So it keeps on going, because the reason is because in my loop my count is never going to increment. So my count is always going to be 0, and it's always going to so because my count is 0, so 0 is always going to be less than 10. It's keep on going. Okay, so let's actually end this. Okay, so and then other thing is like what happened if my if I start with 10 over here. Okay, so now in this case my count is 10, so 10 is less than 10 is false, so that means I'm not going to go through this loop. So let's try that too. Okay, and you'll see that it's never going to ask me for any numbers. Okay, so run window, clear this out, and then let's run this and see that it didn't went through the loop because my loop is already my condition is already false. Okay, so let's see. Now what I want to do is I want to kind of briefly talk about how to actually use this for input validation. Okay, so let's look at that part. Okay, so here's the thing. Input validation. What is input validation? It's a process of ensuring that the user input is valid. So like for example, if I ask the user for the age, and if they enter a negative number or a 0, then of course that doesn't make any sense, right? So that's not a valid input. So I can kind of jack that. Okay, so let's actually let me show you how this will work. Okay, so let's go to our JGraphs, and I'm going to actually again I'm going to comment this out, and then I will start write a new code. Okay, so I'm going to store my input in my variable input. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create okay, let me see, so I'm going to actually assign it 0. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say while input is less than equal to 0. Okay, and then I'm going to say enter your age. And then I'm going to go and read the age. Okay, and then I'm going to say if age is less than or equal to 0, then I'm going to display a message. Okay, so I'm going to say okay. So let's see what's going on. So my input is 0. So as long as my input is negative or less than or equal to 0, I'm going to keep on going through the loop. Okay. Well, actually, let me fix this so it cannot be age. Because I'm using the input, or maybe let's call it age. So we know that we are asking for the age. Okay. Okay. So if they enter a negative number or 0, then basically I'm going to, it will say age is less than or equal to 0. I'm going to display this message. When I will go back up, it's going to be negative, it's going to go back and repeat the loop. Now if they enter a positive number, then I'm going to skip this part, and then when I'll go up, then this will be false, so I'm going to actually exit the loop, and then I'm going to display the message. Okay, so let's compile this and let's give it a try. Okay, so what happened? Keyboard. Okay, so I misspelled my next. Okay, let's try it again. So print. Okay, hopefully this time it will work. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's go and run this, clear this out, run this, and it's going to ask me for my age. Let's say if I enter -5, right? So no, that's invalid. Let's try -6, that's invalid. Let's try 0, and that's invalid. And let's try 1. So yeah, that worked, right? Because my age is 1, so which is a positive number. Well, let me actually fix one more thing over here. So just want to make sure that I have a space in the input, so it looks kind of nicer. Okay, so so that's kind of one way of kind of doing the input validation. Okay, now let's actually look at one more thing. Okay, actually, you know what, I want to show you. There was another exercise problem. I'm not actually going to do this one. I will leave that as an exercise for you guys to do. You don't have to turn this in. You can just do it to make sure that you have an understanding of how this validation loop works. And then if you have any question, just let me know. Okay. Now let's look at the next kind of loop, which is the for loop. So it's also called a counting loop, and it kind of iterate a fixed number of time, and it usually basically what happened is it's kind of similar to the while loop, but everything, all the administrative work like the initializing the counter and incrementing it after the completion of loop is done as a part of the loop structure. So let me show you how it looks like. So it starts with the for keyword. It has 3 parts inside my parenthesis, and again remember there's no semicolon. So there's a semicolon over here, there's a semicolon over here, so make sure that you kind of include that in there. Okay, otherwise if you leave that out, then of course there will be an error. So initialization, this is where I'm going to initialize my counter. This is a condition, so I'm going to execute this loop as long as this condition is true, and then in this section basically I'm going to increment my counter, and then basically this is my body. So I'll start with initialization. I'm going to look at the condition. If it is true, execute the statements that are part of the body, go back up, update the counter, go look at the condition, and then execute. And if the condition is true, execute the statement which are part of the body, go back, increment or update your counter, and so on. Okay, so let's look at an example. So I started with sum, sum is initialized to 0. Then now in this case, because my counter is going to be initialized, and I can also kind of declare the type. So I can say int count equal to 0. This is my condition, count is less than 10, and then count plus plus, right? So initialize my count is 0. As long as my count is less than equal to 10, I'm going to execute the statement. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the count and add it to my sum, increment my count, go back and look at the condition. If it's true, execute the statement, and so on. Okay, so let's actually let's actually write the code for this and see how it looks like. Okay, so I'm going to actually again going to comment that out. Okay, and then I'm going to start the code for the for loop. Okay, so I'm going to say int sum equal to 0, and then I'm going to say for int count. Now I don't really have to call it count. I can just use any name. Normally you will see like I or J, but because in my example I'm using I count, so I'm just going to keep it at count. Count is less than, okay, so less than equal to 10, and then count plus plus. Okay, and then what I'm doing inside the body, I'm just doing sum equal to sum plus count. Okay, and then once I kind of end the loop, I'm going to say okay, so let's try this. Okay, let's compile this. So let's clear this up and let's run this. So sum is 55. So basically count started with 0. So what I did was I'm kind of adding numbers from 0 to 10, and if you add number from 0 to 10, you will see that you will get actually 55. Okay. Okay. Let's do one more example. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually comment this out. Okay, so now in this case the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the user how many numbers they want to add instead of just adding 10 numbers. Okay, so count, and then I'm going to say system.out.print. Because user might want to actually add more than 10 numbers, right? So in this case they can decide like how many numbers they want to add. Let me actually get rid of this, and then I'm going to go and read. Okay, and now what I will do is, when I will do my loop, I will just say int I equal to 0, I is less than count, and I plus plus. Okay, so let's say for example if the count is 10, that means I will go from 0 to 9, so that means my loop will iterate 10 times and will ask the user for 10 numbers. Okay, and if it's 20, then of course my loop is going to iterate 20 times and it's going to ask for 20 numbers, and then I'm going to add them up. Okay, so let me actually also initialize my sum. Okay, because I need that to kind of add my numbers in there. Okay, or do the sum or calculate my sum. Okay, so inside my loop I'm going to ask, okay, let me actually make this bigger. Okay, let me actually create one more variable for my input. And then after the loop I'm going to display the result. Okay, so I'm going to say system.out.println sum is plus sum. See, now this way we can make the program more flexible, right? Because instead of actually doing it exactly the same number of time, the user can decide how many times they want this loop to be repeated. Okay, so let's compile this, clear this up, and then I'm going to actually do, maybe just one number. Okay, so now in this case it's going to ask me for one number, and then it will give me the sum. Okay, so let's try 2 times. So I'm going to say I want to add 2 numbers. So it's going to ask for 2 numbers, and then it's going to give me a sum. Okay, let's try 10 times. I want to add 10 numbers. Okay, so it's going to ask me for 10 numbers, and enter 10 number, and then it gives me the sum. Okay, so see how it, it's more flexible. Instead of asking user for exactly 10 number, 20 number, 30 numbers, we are kind of letting the user decide how many numbers they want to add. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial, and I hope that it's going to help you with your homework. And if you have any question, then just let me know. Thank you, and see you in the next video.